The Maple Grove Community Park glowed like a winter wonderland, strings of white and golden Christmas lights reflecting off freshly fallen snow. Families laughed, children darted between illuminated reindeer and oversized candy canes, and the scent of roasted chestnuts mixed with cocoa and pine. The evening air was crisp, turning each breath into a misty puff, and laughter carried like music across the frozen ground. But beneath the largest oak, where strings of white lights flickered softly, sat a woman alone. Phoebe, in her late 20s, hunched over on a wooden bench, her blonde hair catching the glow above. Her hands covered her face as silent tears ran freely, droplets catching the light like tiny diamonds. Around her, the world seemed to celebrate life, warmth, and togetherness, but she felt like an island in a sea of joy. Dalton Collins, 35, had been strolling nearby with his twin daughters, Zuri and Zara, both 6, bundled in cozy pink coats, matching scarves and mittens. The girls were inseparable, their small hands clasped together, their faces flushed from excitement and cold. Dalton's heart warmed watching them chase each other, their laughter harmonizing with the festive music drifting from the nearby fountain. Then Zuri stopped. Her head tilted slightly, her gaze locking onto the lone woman. "Daddy," she whispered, voice carrying just enough for him to hear. Dalton followed her small finger and froze. Phoebe sat slumped, shoulders shaking, silent sobs escaping her lips. A pang of something he couldn't name hit him, compassion, fear, and an unsettling recognition. It had been 3 years he'd felt grief like that, raw and unshared, a weight pressing on his chest. "Girls," he started gently, "let's—" Zara didn't wait. She was already stepping forward, the tiniest spark of courage lighting her determined little face. And then, before Dalton could stop her, Zuri, with a boldness he'd never seen in her before, called out, "Don't cry, ma'am." The words cut through the night air like a bell, Dalton's stomach plummeting. His daughters, small and fearless, had just made an offer that would have stunned any stranger. "Sorry," Dalton called, his voice strangled. But Zuri and Zara didn't pause. They marched straight to Phoebe, their tiny hands reaching for her. The determination in their posture was unmistakable, the same fire they always showed when they decided something truly important needed to happen. Phoebe looked up, startled, her tear-streaked face shifting from despair to shock. Her eyes met Zuri's, then Zara's, and the strangest thing happened. The walls she had built around herself began to tremble. "Zuri, Zara," Dalton gasped, breath forming clouds in the cold December air. But the girls weren't waiting. They had a mission, and they were fearless. They had decided that someone needed to be comforted tonight, and they had chosen Phoebe. The park around them was alive with color and sound. Families passed by, children tugged at parents' coats, snowflakes drifted lazily in the glow of decorative lights. Yet, at that moment, the world shrunk to the bench beneath the oak tree, where the small act of bravery, the bold declaration of 2 6-year-old girls, had created a bubble of intimacy and surprise. Zara's hand touched Phoebe's, tentative at first. Zuri mirrored her sister, and suddenly Phoebe felt something shift. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't alone. 2 small, warm hands held hers, tiny yet firm, and with them came something she hadn't allowed herself to feel: hope. "They're very perceptive," Dalton muttered under his breath, watching Phoebe's expression softened. He remembered that look. He had worn it himself, that same mixture of surprise and vulnerability. 3 years ago, when the world had stopped making sense for him, and each breath had felt like drowning. Phoebe cleared her throat, fragile and hesitant. "That's very sweet of you both," she whispered, her voice catching. Zuri interrupted, pointing at a tiny freckle near her left ear. "I'm Zuri, and this is Zara." Her voice was small but firm, like a soldier introducing herself before a battle. Dalton swallowed hard. "I'm Dalton, and—" Phoebe smiled faintly, cutting him off. "Phoebe, please don't apologize." The girls climbed onto the bench beside her, each taking one of her hands. "See," Zuri said proudly, "we're excellent at this." Phoebe's lips twitched into a small, almost unsteady smile. Her eyes glistened with tears, but these were different now. They were lighter. There was acknowledgement, recognition, and for a moment she allowed herself to breathe. Dalton, standing awkwardly behind them, felt the familiar pang of helplessness that came whenever he saw someone in pain, especially someone who reminded him of himself. He watched, powerless but thankful, as his daughters bridged the gap between despair and comfort with nothing more than courage and warmth. Thank you, Phoebe whispered softly, her hand trembling slightly as she held theirs. Zara tilted her head, whipped cream still clinging to her lips from the hot chocolate they'd already claimed from the park vendor. Daddy gets lonely sometimes too, she added gently, her voice raw with truth. Dalton felt his chest tighten. The girls had spoken truths he rarely shared. They understood loss in ways adults often forget. Zuri asked, swinging Phoebe's hand gently. Phoebe hesitated. You're not intruding, Dalton said softly, surprise in his own voice. A small, genuine smile spread across Phoebe's face. Then, thank you, I'd like that, she said. The Maple Grove Community Park, with its glittering lights, the soft crunch of snow beneath boots, and the faint strains of carolers nearby, had just witnessed something extraordinary. In the midst of celebration, two small children had reached across the gap between grief and hope and reminded a lonely woman and a hesitant father that connection could still be found, even on the coldest, darkest evenings. Dalton took a deep breath, his daughters tugging Phoebe toward the warmth of the Copper Kettle Cafe. The night was far from over, and the story they were about to begin would change all their lives. The answer was simple. Magic had happened. The magic of hearts willing to love beyond fear, grief, and loneliness. The Copper Kettle Cafe was a small refuge against the December chill, warm light spilling onto the snow-covered sidewalk outside. The bell above the door jingled as Dalton, Zuri, Zara, and Phoebe entered. The smell of cinnamon, nutmeg, and freshly baked pastries wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. Children's laughter and clinking mugs created a cozy soundtrack that felt worlds apart from the glittering chaos of the park outside. Phoebe followed cautiously, a little hesitant, like a traveler stepping into unfamiliar territory after years of wandering alone. Her eyes swept the room. Patrons chatted softly over mugs of cocoa, steam rising in lazy curls. The waitress, Mrs. Corey, looked up with curiosity, her gaze lingering on the blonde woman being gently guided by two tiny girls. "Dalton, girls!" Mrs. Corey exclaimed, her warmth immediately welcoming. "Hot chocolate?" The twins had already claimed a corner booth by the window, their faces pressed to the glass to watch snowflakes twirl in the wind. Zuri waved at Phoebe enthusiastically. "Come sit." Phoebe hesitated for a heartbeat, then allowed the girls to pull her toward the booth. Dalton followed, his hands buried in his coat pockets, feeling both nervous and relieved. The chaos of the park had been replaced with calm, but the intensity of what had just happened still lingered in his chest. "Do you want tea?" Zuri asked, eyes wide with anticipation. "Of course," Mrs. Corey laughed, already bustling toward the counter. The girls giggled and helped Phoebe settle into the booth. Dalton sat across from them, taking a moment to simply watch. Phoebe's hands were still clasped with the twins, her fingers trembling slightly. "You're very good at this," Phoebe whispered, voice breaking but soft. Zara smiled faintly. Phoebe's eyes softened. She had spent years keeping grief locked tight, hidden behind routines and work. She had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, to be included. And now, two small children had claimed her as someone worth caring for. The realization struck her like a gentle but insistent wave. Dalton cleared his throat softly. "Phoebe, Words failed him. He wasn't sure what to say to explain what had just happened, but he didn't need to. Phoebe's attention wasn't on him, it was on the girls, on their warmth and courage. I lost my family," Phoebe said finally, the words almost a whisper. Zuri's eyes widened. Phoebe nodded slowly, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Yes." The twins exchanged a solemn glance. Zara reached across the table and patted Phoebe's hand gently. "We know about lonely," she said softly. Dalton felt a lump form in his throat. The girls had spoken truths he rarely shared. They understood grief in ways adults often forget. Phoebe blinked rapidly, swallowing the lump in her throat. She looked at Dalton with her fragile half-smile. "They're my world," Dalton replied, voice catching. He hadn't shared the depth of that sentiment in years, yet here he was, watching them effortlessly connect with someone who had been invisible for far too long. Zuri tugged gently at Phoebe's hand. "Come with us." Phoebe laughed softly, a small sound that carried warmth.
"You're not intruding," Dalton said firmly. For the first time in years, Phoebe felt seen. She felt included. She felt a warmth that had been missing for so long.
And she allowed herself to stay. Mrs. Corey returned moments later with a tray full of steaming mugs, whipped cream piled high, candy canes jutting out like cheerful little flags. The girls attacked their hot chocolate with enthusiasm, their laughter echoing through the cafe. Phoebe watched, her own hands wrapped around the warmth of the mug, letting the aroma fill her senses. "Phoebe?" asked softly. Zuri said emphatically. Dalton smiled, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. His daughters had always had a keen sense of empathy, but this was extraordinary. They had chosen Phoebe as someone who needed their love, and she had accepted it. Phoebe looked down at the small, freckled faces of the twins. Their courage, innocence, and warmth were disarming. They had stepped into her grief without hesitation and offered her something she hadn't felt in years: connection. Zuri asked, small voice brimming with honesty. Dalton felt a pang of sorrow. He rarely spoke about Melissa, their daughter's mother, but now, with Phoebe here, with the girls holding her hands, it felt like the right moment. She passed away," Dalton said quietly. Zara's eyes filled with tears. Phoebe's hand tightened around theirs. She didn't speak immediately. The weight of shared grief settled over the table, but it was no longer isolating. Now it was a bond. For a long while they simply sat together, hands entwined, hot chocolate growing lukewarm, the world outside continuing its festive dance. They shared stories in small whispers, laughter peeking through sorrow. Dalton watched as Phoebe, once a stranger, began to become part of their lives. Zara asked, tentative yet hopeful. Dalton hesitated, heart racing. Zuri exclaimed, "We have presents and pancakes and movies." Phoebe blinked, unsure. "You're not imposing," Dalton said softly, his voice steady. Phoebe allowed herself a small, shaky smile. Then, yes. The girls erupted in cheers, clinking their mugs together like tiny champagne glasses, their joy infectious. Dalton felt a strange mixture of relief and amazement. In one evening, a woman who had been crying alone in a park had been welcomed into their lives, her grief acknowledged, her presence celebrated. The evening drew to a close with promises of pancakes, presents, and shared laughter. Phoebe left the cafe feeling a lightness she hadn't felt in years, her heart buoyed by the warmth and innocence of two small children who had reminded her of the power of connection. Dalton walked her to her car, their breaths mingling in the crisp winter air. "You belong here," he said quietly, the words resonating with the depth she felt in her bones. Phoebe looked at him, tears in her eyes, but for the first time in years, they were not just tears of sorrow. They were tears of hope. "You belong here," Dalton repeated, a promise as much as a statement.
Phoebe nodded, voice barely above a whisper. Dalton smiled, relief washing over him. "You already have a place." The night skies stretched above them, clear and star-filled. Snowflakes drifted lazily to the ground, settling softly on the windshield of Phoebe's car. Inside, hearts had been touched, connections formed, and hope had begun again. The first steps of an extraordinary journey, of trust, love, and family, had been taken. And it all began with two small voices, brave and compassionate, saying, "Don't cry, ma'am." The morning light of Christmas Eve spilled softly into Dalton's kitchen. Steam curled from a pot on the stove, carrying the scent of cinnamon, vanilla, and melting chocolate. The twins, Zuri and Zara, had been up since dawn, buzzing with excitement and anticipation. Their small feet pitter-pattered across the wooden floor as they peeked out the window, waiting for the first snowflakes to drift lazily from the sky. Dalton moved around the kitchen, trying to manage both the pancakes batter and the chaos that came with two children on the verge of Christmas magic. Flour dusted the counters like fresh snow, and the twins' laughter mingled with the sizzling sounds from the stove. "Daddy," Zuri asked, her eyes wide. Dalton grinned, shaking his head. "We'll try, but I can't promise perfection." Zara giggled, hopping onto a stool. "We don't care." Just then the doorbell rang. Dalton wiped his hands on a kitchen towel and opened a door to reveal Phoebe, bundled in a cream-colored sweater and scarf, her cheeks pink from the winter air. Her eyes lit up at the sight of the chaotic kitchen, the scattered flour, and two tiny tornadoes bouncing with anticipation. "Phoebe!" Zori shouted, rushing forward to hug her. Zara followed immediately, sandwiching Phoebe between them in a warm embrace. Phoebe laughed, feeling the warmth seep into her frozen heart. Of course I came. Dalton stepped aside, letting her in. Welcome to our chaos. Phoebe chuckled softly, scanning the room. The tree leaned slightly to one side, ornaments mismatched, some handmade, some store-bought, yet all glowing with love. Presents spilled underneath, colorful wrapping paper hinting at the surprises within. This was a family home alive with joy, and for Phoebe it was a revelation, a glimpse of what belonging could feel like.
The twins led Phoebe to the living room, showing her the carefully arranged stack of presents, the decorations they had helped Dalton put up, and the tiny snow globe that sat on the mantel. Zuri held up a handmade card. "This is for you, Miss Phoebe." Phoebe's eyes misted as she accepted the card. The artwork inside depicted the four of them holding hands, hearts floating above their heads. "It's perfect," she whispered. Breakfast was a merry disaster. Pancakes flew from the pan, some landing on the floor, others sticking together in imperfect snowman shapes. The twins squealed with delight, and Phoebe joined in, helping Dalton flip a particularly stubborn pancake. Chocolate chips, syrup, and laughter covered every surface. For the first time in years, Phoebe felt truly at home, messy, imperfect, but full of love. As they settled with plates piled high, Siri spoke up. "Miss Phoebe, we've been waiting for you." Dalton watched quietly, his heart swelling. His daughters had a way of seeing through pain, of recognizing those who needed love, and they had done so with Phoebe. Her presence, once tentative, now felt natural, like she belonged in the rhythm of their lives. After breakfast, the twins unveiled their art supplies, gifts Phoebe had given them the previous evening. Watercolor sets, sketchbooks, brushes of every size, tools to capture the world as they saw it. Zuri's eyes sparkled as she dipped her brush into the vivid pigments. Phoebe knelt beside them, guiding their tiny hands as they mixed colors and created washes, laughing at their experiments. Dalton sat back on the couch, watching the three of them, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Phoebe's presence had softened the edges of grief, both his and the girls. She was not replacing their mother. She was adding another layer of love to their lives. Hours passed in a blissful blur of color, laughter, and gentle teasing. Phoebe shared stories of her own childhood, of her lost siblings, of dreams she had once held. The girls listened intently, hanging on to every word. Dalton joined in, sharing memories of Melissa, of the little moments that had shaped their family. There was no shame, no avoidance, only acceptance and shared humanity. As afternoon fell and the first soft snow began to drift again, Dalton suggested a walk to the park. Zuri and Zara raced ahead, Phoebe following close behind. The park sparkled under the Christmas lights, children and families moving between displays, laughter ringing out like chimes. Dalton kept a steady pace, watching Phoebe's expression as she took in the festive scene. There was joy there, yes, but also a quiet reverence, a sense that she was witnessing the warmth of family in a way she hadn't in years. At the park bench where it had all begun, the night she had cried alone, Dalton stopped. Phoebe looked at him, curiosity mixed with hesitation. The twins climbed onto the bench, their hands holding hers as always. 2 years ago tonight we found you here, Zuri said softly. Phoebe's eyes glistened. I remember. Dalton smiled gently. And now we want to make more memories. The evening drew on and Phoebe stayed with them, sharing in the simple joys of Christmas Eve, building small snowmen, sipping cocoa, reading stories by the fire. She laughed freely, the walls she had built over years of grief slowly crumbling. The twins' joy was infectious, their love unconditional. Dalton felt a deep sense of peace watching them, knowing that in a single day, a fractured world had begun to heal. Later, as Phoebe prepared to leave, the twins clung to her hands. "Thank you for coming," Zara whispered. "I love you both," Phoebe replied, tears streaming. Dalton walked her to the car, the night crisp and quiet around them. "You've done something remarkable today," he said. Phoebe smiled, her heart full. As she drove away, the car disappearing into the snowy night, Dalton stood on the porch, watching his daughters wave. He felt hope stirred deep within him, a hope that love, even after loss, could be found again. And that night, the twins fell asleep in a shared bed, their dreams filled with snowflakes, laughter, and the warmth of a woman who had become part of their family. Phoebe sat by the window in her apartment, holding a small card from the twins, smiling through tears. For the first time in years, she felt she had a place to belong, a family that welcomed her not as a replacement, but as someone extra, someone chosen. The first Christmas together had been chaotic, messy, imperfect, but full of love, understanding, and connection. And for Dalton, Phoebe, Zuri, and Zara, it was only the beginning of a journey that would forever bind their hearts together. Zuri and Zara thrived under the warmth and attention from both Dalton and Phoebe. Their laughter echoed through the house as they explored new creative projects or built elaborate forts in the living room. Phoebe guided their art sessions, teaching them how to blend colors, create depth, and see the world from a new perspective. Dalton watched quietly, admiring how naturally she connected with the twins. It wasn't just care, it was understanding, patience, and love, all rolled into one. Yet, as spring melted into summer, the idyllic harmony began to show cracks. Phoebe's work schedule became unpredictable, and Dalton noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. She arrived late, distracted, and sometimes canceled plans at the last minute. Initially, he brushed it off, attributing it to deadlines or stress, but over time, the pattern became harder to ignore. One evening, Dalton sat in the living room, the twins at the table working on watercolor landscapes, when he finally broached the subject. "Phoebe," he said gently, "you've been distant lately." Phoebe looked up from the dishes she was drying, her hands trembling slightly. She hesitated before answering. I don't know if I'm ready for this." Dalton's heart tightened. "Yes," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "The girls, you, this family, I love being here, but sometimes I feel like I'm in over my head. I didn't raise kids." Dalton leaned forward, his expression soft but firm. "Phoebe, no one expects perfection. You don't have to be their mother. You just have to be yourself, the person we all already love. Messy, scared, unsure, that's enough." Phoebe's eyes filled with tears. "But what if I mess up? What if I hurt them?" Dalton reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Then we deal with it, together. That's what families do. No one expects you to be flawless." The twins overheard the conversation and ran over, their small hands clutching Phoebe's. "We know you're scared," Zara said softly, "but we love you anyway." Zuri nodded, echoing, "Exactly." Phoebe laughed shakily, the tension easing slightly, as she knelt to hug both girls. Dalton watched, feeling a swell of pride. These moments, the honesty, the acceptance, the unwavering connection, were the foundation of something deeper than just companionship. But life had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. At school, the twins faced challenges, bullying, social pressures, and moments of grief resurfacing.
One afternoon, Dalton returned from work to find Zuri and Zara sitting quietly on the couch, their eyes red and puffy. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling beside them. Zara wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Madison said we don't have a real family." Dalton felt his stomach drop. "You have a dad and Phoebe, but she's not our mommy. She can't be. Everyone else has a mommy." Dalton took a deep breath, kneeling in front of them. "I know it's hard. You're comparing yourself to others, but that doesn't make your family any less real. You have a dad who loves you and Phoebe who chose to be here every single day because she cares for you. That's real. That's love." Zara buried her face in Dalton's chest and Zuri leaned against his side. For a long moment, silence enveloped the room, broken only by the soft sound of their breathing. Dalton felt a surge of protectiveness, anger, and empathy. The world could be cruel, but he would be their anchor, guiding them through the confusion. Phoebe arrived later that evening, hesitating at the door. She had sensed the tension in the messages Dalton had sent earlier. As she stepped inside, the twins ran to her, clinging tightly. "We're sorry, Miss Phoebe," Zuri whispered. "We didn't mean it." Phoebe hugged them both, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's okay, my loves. I understand. I know it's confusing. And I'm sorry if I made you feel like you had to choose between loving me or remembering your mommy. You don't have to." Dalton watched silently, heart full. These moments of vulnerability were as important as the joyful ones. They built resilience, trust, and the foundation for a lifelong bond. Over the following months, Phoebe learned to navigate the complexities of her role in their lives. She wasn't perfect, and she didn't try to be. She simply showed up, whether for a scraped knee, a school project, or a late-night meltdown. She laughed, cried, and celebrated with the twins, becoming their extra love, a constant presence that didn't replace their mother but added warmth to the life she had left behind.
Dalton and Phoebe's relationship deepened alongside their shared responsibility for the twins. They communicated openly, resolving conflicts with honesty and care. Every Saturday coffee, every walk in the park, every shared meal became a thread weaving their lives closer together. Yet, even as the bond grew stronger, the fear of failure lingered.
Phoebe's self-doubt occasionally resurfaced, and Dalton's protective instincts sometimes clashed with his desire to let her navigate her own path. They argued, rarely but fiercely, over boundaries, parenting choices, and the pressures of blending families. But each argument ended with understanding, compromise, and renewed commitment. The twins observed it all, learning about love, resilience, and the messy beauty of real life. They saw that even adults made mistakes, that emotions were valid, and that honesty and vulnerability were strengths, not weaknesses. One particularly stormy afternoon, Dalton and Phoebe found themselves stranded at the kitchen table, twins engrossed in a movie. Thunder rolled outside, and Phoebe confessed, "I'm terrified, Dalton. I don't know if I can keep doing this. What if I fail them?" Dalton reached across the table, taking her hands. "Phoebe, we're all learning. No one has it all figured out. You've already done more than anyone could expect. You've loved, shown up, and cared. That's enough." Phoebe smiled weakly, tears glinting in her eyes. I don't want to hurt anyone anymore." "You won't lose us," Dalton said firmly. "We're choosing each other every day, and we'll keep choosing, even when it's hard, even when it's scary." The storm raged outside, but inside, the warmth and love of their home created a haven of safety and trust. That night, Phoebe sat with the twins, reading stories and brushing their hair, feeling a deep sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in years. Dalton watched them from the doorway, feeling an overwhelming gratitude for the woman who had become their extra love, and the partner who had shown him the meaning of resilience and care. The months passed, filled with triumphs and trials, laughter and tears. Phoebe became integral to the twins' lives, not as a replacement, but as a constant source of love and guidance. Dalton and Phoebe grew together, learning to navigate the complexities of blended families, grief, and hope. And through it all, the little moments, the shared pancakes, the painting sessions, the quiet conversations, the laughter, and the tears, built a bond that was unshakable, resilient, and beautiful. By the end of the summer, the family had weathered storms, celebrated milestones, and navigated misunderstandings, emerging stronger and more connected than ever. The foundation laid in those early months promised a future filled with love, joy, and the unshakable certainty that together they could face anything. The late autumn air had a crisp edge to it, carrying the promise of the approaching holiday season. Maple Grove Community Park was already beginning to sparkle with festive lights, echoing the memory of the first evening when Dalton's daughters had offered their father to a lonely stranger. That night had been the beginning of something extraordinary. Tonight, it would reach its most beautiful, long-awaited conclusion. Dalton, Phoebe, and the twins had spent weeks planning this evening. Zuri and Zara were practically vibrating with excitement, barely able to contain the secret they'd been sworn to keep. The twins had insisted on being involved in every detail. "It has to be perfect," Zuri whispered to her sister as they draped lights over the oak tree in the center of the park. Dalton had carried the sapphire ring in his pocket for months, the weight of it both grounding and terrifying. He had rehearsed what he would say over and over, but he knew that no rehearsal could truly capture the emotions of the moment. Phoebe's presence had transformed not only his daughters' lives, but his own. She was more than a partner. She was family, a part of their very foundation. The twins led Phoebe through the winding paths of the park, their small hands clasped firmly in hers. "Where are we going?" Zara asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Phoebe followed the trail of twinkling lights, her heart beating faster as she approached the familiar oak tree adorned in white lights. Memories of that first Christmas Eve flooded her mind, the loneliness, the grief, and the unexpected lifeline offered by two small hands and two innocent voices. Dalton stepped into view, kneeling in the snow beneath the oak tree, the ring box clutched in his hands. "Phoebe," he began, voice steady yet trembling. "2 years ago tonight, you were sitting right here, feeling like you had no place in the world. My daughters offered you something precious, their father. Tonight, I want to offer you everything we have." Phoebe's breath caught in her throat. Tears welled in her eyes as she took in the scene, the twinkle of the lights, the snow falling softly around them, the twins standing proudly on either side of Dalton. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The twins erupted in joyous screams, running into Phoebe's arms. Dalton slipped the sapphire ring onto her finger, the cold metal warm with significance, a symbol of love, hope, and the family they had chosen together. The park seemed to glow brighter, the cheers of the few onlookers blending with the magic of the moment. From that night forward, their lives continued to bloom, each day deepening the bond they shared. The twins thrived in the warmth of a home filled with love, trust, and laughter. Phoebe became their extra love, guiding them through school projects, cheering them on at every recital, and celebrating even the smallest achievements with genuine enthusiasm. Dalton marveled at her patience and dedication, knowing she had become the heart of their home. Spring arrived, bringing with it a new sense of stability. The twins' birthdays were celebrated with all the chaotic joy that had become a hallmark of their household: paint splatters, glitter everywhere, and pancakes stacked high with syrup. Phoebe joined in every moment, her laughter mingling seamlessly with the children's giggles, her presence a constant reassurance of safety, love, and belonging. Dalton and Phoebe's relationship grew stronger as well, evolving from friendship and mutual care into a profound, unwavering partnership. They shared quiet evenings after the children had gone to bed, reflecting on the journey that had brought them together and the future they were building. They faced challenges, the pressure of work, the occasional conflict over parenting choices, but each obstacle strengthened their trust, communication, and love for one another. One particularly tender morning, Dalton watched Phoebe help the twins with their art projects, her hands guiding theirs with gentle precision. The room was alive with color and creativity, a perfect reflection of the life they had built together. Dalton realized that this was what family looked like, not perfection, but shared moments of joy, support, and love. As the seasons passed, holidays and birthdays became opportunities for new memories. Christmas mornings were filled with excitement, wrapping paper, and squeals of delight as the twins tore through presents, with Phoebe and Dalton sharing quiet, meaningful smiles across the room. Phoebe's presence in their lives had transformed the holidays from a reminder of loss into celebrations of connection, love, and resilience. Even the small, everyday moments held profound significance: making breakfast together, reading bedtime stories, sharing late-night conversations over cocoa. Dalton and Phoebe discovered a rhythm that balanced love, responsibility, and joy, each day reinforcing the unbreakable bond they shared with the twins. Yet life was not without its tests. The twins faced challenges at school, moments of insecurity, and social pressures that occasionally led to tears or frustration. Dalton and Phoebe navigated these with patience, empathy, and teamwork, always modeling love, understanding, and resilience. They celebrated achievements, comforted disappointments, and ensured that the twins felt safe, valued, and cherished every single day. By the time the next Christmas rolled around, their home was alive with the magic of family. The tree was adorned with ornaments collected over years, some handmade, some carefully chosen, each carrying memories of the moments and people they loved. The twins ran through the living room, laughter echoing, while Phoebe and Dalton shared a quiet moment in the kitchen, sipping cocoa and watching the chaos unfold with full hearts. On that night, Dalton reflected on the journey they had taken, from a lonely woman on a park bench to a beloved partner and mother figure, from two grieving children to a happy, thriving family, and from two hearts unsure of the future to a shared, committed love that promised to endure through all of life's challenges. He realized that hope had truly begun again on that park bench, and it would continue forever and always through the lives they had chosen to build together. The simple acts of kindness, bravery, and love, the children's courage, Phoebe's willingness to show up, Dalton's commitment to family, had woven a tapestry of resilience, trust, and joy that would carry them through every season of life. The story of that first Christmas Eve, when two small voices offered a father to a lonely woman, had transformed into a lifelong tale of connection, healing, and love. Dalton, Phoebe, Zuri, and Zara had created a family rooted not in perfection, but in the choice to care for one another every single day. They had discovered that family was not defined by biology alone, but by presence, support, and unwavering love. And in the quiet moments, when the house settled into sleep and the world outside was blanketed in snow, the warmth inside the home spoke of the enduring power of hope, the beauty of second chances, and the magic of a family who had chosen one another. This was their story, a story of love, courage, and connection, a story that began with two small hands reaching out to comfort a stranger, and blossomed into a life filled with laughter, tears, shared memories, and the unwavering certainty that together they could face anything. Phoebe smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "No, thank you." And the twins, nestled between them, whispered in unison, "We love you, Mom. We love you, Dad." Outside, the snow continued to fall gently, twinkling in the lamplight. Inside, the warmth of family, love, and hope glowed brighter than any Christmas lights, a beacon that would shine forever. Here in this small, imperfect, beautifully chaotic home, hope truly began again, and it would never end.